Believe Psychology Film Festival is happening Saturday, May 17th and Sunday, May 18th at the Cat's Crawl Theater in Los Angeles, California. Bringing psychology and film together, this event showcases thought-provoking stories that explore the human experience with depth and authenticity. Tickets are on sale now at BelievePsychologyFilmFest.com, and you can find a link in the description of this episode. Both Daniel and myself will be there in collaboration, so if you want to come say hi, introduce yourself, as well as check out some of the amazing creative work by the filmmakers and other artists, now's your chance. Hope to see you there. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Therapy by the Book. My name is William Haddad.
I'm Daniel Villanueva.
And this is the show where we take your favorite fictional characters and ask the question, what would it be like if they came to therapy? For this episode, our first for the month of May, in celebration of May the 4th, we're going to be doing something very special this month. We're going to be receiving character client referrals from a galaxy far, far away.
And I would argue, probably the most well-known villain in the world, man. I might get in trouble by other enthusiasts, but I really feel like Mr. Vader himself is the king. Everybody, even if you're not into the series, even if you're not into the world, even if you have never watched a movie, if you see that face, that mug, well, that mask, I guess. You know who he is.
You're gonna get no argument from me, man. He is the OG. He is the villain of all villains. And I think for a lot of us, for people of my generation, born in the 90s and the 80s, and I mean, heck, the late 70s would still technically count. I think he was the first villain, first movie villain, anyway, for a lot of kids.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the most widespread. There was the Count Draculas and everybody else, but for some reason, Mr. Vader, as I like to call him, really shined. Man. He stood out among all of them, stood on top of all of them. I think for a good reason, and also because of the complexity of him as a being. And the different layers of his life.
Yeah, one of the things that many things extraordinary about Darth Vader is that his character, the reasons to find him impressive, intimidating, and fascinating as a character have only increased with time and with each new installment of the Star Wars franchise that's come out. It's like every new show or movie or book adds another layer of complexity and nuance to his identity.
I was thinking the exact same thing. What really got me was on the new Disney Plus series that they put out. You could see they give you a real glimpse into his power, man. When he uses, the force, the hand force. I'm just going to call it because I don't know exactly what it's called, but where he's ripping ships open. He's doing things that are just mind-blowing. I knew he was powerful just because they said he was, but to be able to actually see it, to feel it in a way, that really changed the way my perception of him. Where maybe I thought, some people could take him out. Now I'm questioning it. I don't know.
It's a coin toss. I mean, depending on who we're saying is going up against him. At the best of times, I think, because he's packing. His duelist skills with a lightsaber, his command of the Force. But it's not just that too. He's not just a competent warrior in a one-on-one battle. This is also somebody who is a master wartime tactician, general, military strategist, and in the words of Obi-Wan himself, the best star pilot in the galaxy.
Yeah, of course. And the mind manipulation and everything else. And as we're going to get into, his trauma really shaped his being. And he was able to use that to understand other people's needs and wants, and to find the weaknesses, to find the vulnerability that he can take advantage of in order to protect himself from his own, obviously.
One thing I want to ask I thought it'd be kind of fun to figure this out in real time is at what point in Vader's career are we getting this referral? Because I think depending on the when is going to make unlike some of the other characters we see here, is going to make a bit of a difference in terms of what we're going to know going in, what we can take with us as clinicians into session, and probably what's going to come up in session 2. So, what do you think? When are we seeing him?
Well, I think we should each go from where we're at. My mindset was that somehow he was saved, somehow he lived. The Rebel Alliance helped him somehow. I don't know. He came back, and I was seeing him post everything when they thought he was dead. And so I was able to get him at a point where he was still trying or struggling to reconnect with his true, authentic self, because it was vulnerable, it was weak, as he would see it, but also still had the rage and the pain that he had gone through all his life, floating around. And I played with the idea that he was still fighting those demons, and now the identity that he created, it's going to be hard for him to leave that identity. It's going to be hard for him to go back to or reconcile to be Anakin again. That's where I came from.
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay,
that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, because it poses a question that the actual films never got to ask, which is what happens. What would have happened? What would have he done if he'd managed to survive that final battle with the Emperor and everything that he does for Luke at the end? Spoiler alert: Return of the Jedi, a movie from 1983 or whatever.
It's gonna. This podcast is gonna freak people out. He's actually his son. Don't freak out, guys. I hate to ruin
deep
that
breaths.
for you.
We'll talk you through it. We'll give you some coping skills to ground. It's okay. It's part of the story.
It's all part of the process. Yeah, it's well, let's start from the beginning, man. Let's go back. Let's do a little psychodynamic and let's talk about
my favorite.
Yeah, there you go. Let's go with this idea that he was kind of born into, well, not kind of, he was born into slavery. And so he's, this force sensitive kid that doesn't really understand what he has. He's in Tatooine. Is that how you pronounce that?
You're Tatooine.
The expert, not me. And then he's, taken from his mom to become a Jedi, or at least train. And then there's a lot of conflicts there. But before I move to that next section, which I think is a big one, what do you think about that? What do you think about his basically his slave days and his racer days? Because he was a speed racer.
No, you can't overlook it. And it's the only reason it does kind of get overlooked is because so much else happened to him afterwards. Trauma. He's a character whose entire life is practically defined by trauma from birth. From birth. His
I would even. Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to say, and I would even argue generational trauma, man, because this is going on for a while. It didn't start with him. He was a byproduct of it. That's why he was, born into slavery. That's why he was objectified. That's why he went through all that, because, it was happening to his parents and probably his parents' parents.
I don't know if this is still the official Disney canon, but as I knew about it originally in the expanded lore, his mother, Shmi Skywalker, she was, I believe she was sold into slavery, not at birth, but at a very young age, because she was captured when she and her parents were out on like a vacation cruise in the Outer Rim territory. And they were attacked. I think it was a pirate raid or something of that nature. And Shmi was sold into slavery. She was very young. She was, I think, 6, maybe 5 or younger. So she from that point on, her life became that of a slave when she was just a child. And
Wow.
she was several times over the course of her life as a slave, she was tantalized by the prospect of freedom. She originally, I don't know if this was her first slave master or owner, but one of her early slave owners planned to grant her freedom upon reaching a certain point. But then that owner unexpectedly died, and when it happened, she was sold to a relative. So the cycle just kept continuing. And after she had Anakin, they were sold again to one of the Hutts, not Jabba, but Gardulla, who's Jabba's rival back in the day. So from Gardulla, they were then Gardulla bet them as part of a wager on a pod race, ironically, and lost the wager, and that was how they ended up getting sold to the junk dealer Watto on Tatooine, where we first meet them in the films. So to get back to what you were saying, Anakin, yeah, it is generational. He's coming from he's born only child, no father, to a woman whose entire life and identity was ripped away, and she lost her parents and is dealing with all of that grief and all of the trauma that comes from living the life of a slave, where being a slave is you have no identity, you're property.
No,
there's
you're literally
no
property.
sense of self. You have
Yes.
no. It's very hard in now. There is still human trafficking, there is still slavery going on in the world,
yes.
unfortunately. But it is true that for the most part, it's much less common than it used to be. And it is very hard if you're not familiar with slavery, if you haven't studied it or you haven't done some work on that, to wrap your head around the concept of what it's like to have no sense of self, to be just a living object if you've never experienced it or explored that very thoroughly before. It really messes with a lot of the fundamentals and a lot of what we take for granted about our perception of reality.
Yes, yeah, it's very you lose your sense of self-worth, and self-esteem. Obviously, it's just shot because you are property, and people that I have worked with that were victims of cartel or even former prisoners. They would equate being in prison to being a slave. That their names were taken away. They were a number. They were an object for whether it was a work camp or fire camps or whatever it might have been. Which is, I hate to say, a better version of it. At least they got outside, but from what I've been told, that it's very minimizing. It's a feeling of hopelessness and complete despair, disconnection from self, and that you need to answer and go with or do whatever you're told. I can't even begin to compare this. Or slavery in general, but I can say that there are a lot of people that experience this, unfortunately, even today, just like you were saying.
Exactly. And to go through all that from day one, to be born into that, not to have a common frame of reference of an existence outside of that minimal, that low self-worth, minimal reality. That's what Anakin was given.
Yes, he was born to know that he was a property that could be bought, sold, and traded. And with that, we got no need to be emotionally connected to anything, because you never know when it's going to be taken away. You never know what's going to happen next. But then there was his mom, which there was a connection there.
I was going to say, with the exception of his mother, I think.
Which I left that for the end, man, because that's going to lead us to part 2 out of 5,000 of this guy, But yeah, except for his mom. What were you going to say? Expand.
Well, that's the thing. She, she's kind of the exception, I think, to otherwise the rule of his slave reality, which was that there is no need for emotional connection with anybody. But Shmi is a really extraordinary figure because one, she understands what it's like to be in his world. She was a child too when she became a slave, but she also wasn't born to it. So she also has a frame of reference that is that, however distant, exists outside the bonds of slavery. And you have to kind of dive into the expanded lore to learn about this side of her. But this was something that she did raise Anakin with. She encouraged him to try to think outside the box, to not let the reality of slavery be all that defines him forever. If he had dreams, if he had interests, if he had things that slaves normally shouldn't concern themselves with, she never tried to shut those down. She never tried to say, don't think like that. Just, keep your head down and be a good slave. She actually encouraged him to nurture and cultivate those little pieces of existence beyond of self.
Yeah.
There you go, of self. So that, getting that kind of validation, that kind of support from his mother in an otherwise eternally dark horizon of a world, really would have, I think, impacted him.
I agree, and I think that was the little bit of hope that he did get, and which is, again, there's going to be a lot of pieces of this podcast that are going to sound horrible, but at least he was traded to, or sold to, or lost to somebody that wasn't overtly abusive, and so that he did have time to cultivate his identity, to be himself, and for his mom to be able to give him some opportunities, to raise her or whatever it might be, to tinker, because he was a tinkerer as well, really good with robots and everything else in his hands, and to find out who he is, and with that, I'll step forward. You can bring me back because there's it's so meaty here.
Oh yeah, we're going to be jumping around constantly, so go for it.
Because then we get him to this young man. He gets taken away from his mom by choice, in a way, because for a better life. But then he's with a bunch of people, and this is, I'm sorry guys, but this is just the reality. The Jedi Force Union Order, they demand emotional suppression. So now he has been suppressed because of slavery. His mom is planting these tiny seeds that are maybe starting to grow, and we're not even talking a bounty. We're talking a couple sprouts. And now he's placed in a place where he needs to suppress it all, because you're not supposed to be emotional. You're supposed to be, wow, this is going to really piss people off. Maybe I shouldn't even say that. I was gonna say you got to be Spocky.
That's going to bring on the flame war.
Yeah, I take it back. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. But you have to be completely suppressed of emotions and more intellectual, and follow your gut, which I would even argue is your heart. And I think that's a talking point with him. But this initiates, all this suffering, man. It's this profound stages of loss. He loses his mother, of course, indirectly, directly, however you want to look at it, but she's still gone. He loses his wife eventually, and ultimately he loses his identity. He loses self. So there's just so many layers that he's already starting to get pieces of, and feeling rejected and not part of anything, and never being actually part of anything. He's always been, since birth, completely and utterly disconnected from everyone, and like we said a couple minutes ago, from self, which is even worse.
Right. We talked about this a little bit back in our Obi-Wan episode, but the Jedi Council, for all the good they've done, really screwed up royally with the approach that they took to Anakin,
I agree.
bringing him on. Because if you think about it, the one thing that was keeping his spirit intact was that emotional connection he had with his mom. As you say, it was the small but still present seeds of hope, of possibility, that allowed him to feel at least that he could be maybe someday more than just a slave, even if that was all he was for the time
Absolutely.
being. That was it allowed him the ability to at least visualize in the abstract sense that he had some self-worth, some self-identity. And then suddenly when he's able to actually use that and win the pod race, which is what allows him to be freed as a slave, thanks to Qui-Gon stepping in, and then actually leave Tatooine and claim, and hope, in theory, claim that sense of self. What's the first thing that he's told to do? Strip away all your emotions, stop feeling, become a completely blank slate that does whatever the Jedi Order tells you. How the heck is that any better than what he's been growing up with?
Exactly. And I didn't do a deep enough dive because I didn't want to minimize our client, right? I didn't want to minimize the pain he's gone through and the struggle. So I didn't want to go deep into why the Jedi see the world that way or need to see the world that way. Assuming it has to do with greed and not wanting to get pulled into a tornado of wants or needs. So there isn't greed. There isn't wanting to become the ruler, to become anything, just to be a light in darkness, and that's it. So I guess I could see that, but I think with him, he's always, and he continues to be, even after he gets his armor, he gets his masks, he's still the little boy. You can see it in the patterns and the behaviors. He's still someone that wants to save everybody. He wants to save the people he loves. He wants to make sure that he doesn't lose anybody ever again. And this all comes from where we are right now. And like I said, we're going to get through. It's going to take us a while, but we can see how this is already starting to develop, and this mindset of, no, I'm not going to live like this. I can do more because I am more. So there was a growth of self-esteem, and unfortunately, and we'll find out later, that was fed by the wrong person in the wrong direction. That's for sure.
Yeah, his fall to the dark side was much of it influenced and manipulated by the exploitation of Palpatine, or Darth Sidious. And yeah, that at the end of the day, that is the bulk of what made it happen, have made it possible. Because and we'll go into this more, but yeah, Palpatine used that weakness, well, not that weakness, but that
vulnerability,
vulnerability, that hidden pain, and struggle with a sense of identity and a sense of belonging that Anakin was still wrestling with, even as a fully grown adult, to his advantage, to get what he wanted from him.
So do you think that Palpatine read some books and he realized that Anakin had some anxious, preoccupied attachment style, and he was like, oh, I can take advantage of that.
Oh yeah,
I can make him fear losing and give him a false sense of control, and then attack that wound.
I think so. Well, the thing about Palpatine is that, being a Sith, the Sith are the polar opposite of the Jedi in that they embrace emotion, and they embrace autonomy and individuality in all the extreme ways that the Jedi try to disassociate with. And it's, obvious, and leaving aside for a second the horrendous crimes, the awful murder and quests for power and domination that the Sith are guilty of. From Anakin's perspective, there is, I think, a lot that he would have that he can relate to, that he would have appreciated, even if Palpatine had been straight up with him from the get-go about being a Sith. I don't think Anakin would have entirely written him off, because he would have been able to relate to that desire of self-actualization that the Sith philosophy is defined by. Now, he wouldn't have, at least, he hopefully wouldn't have approved of the disregard for life and disregard for friendship, for being kind, for being compassionate. Because Anakin's not a cruel person by nature. As you were saying before, he always tries to save everyone. And that's something that neither the Jedi nor the Sith really ever have believed in with either of their philosophies. Interestingly, Anakin is kind of an interesting case, because he's, I think, and maybe we'll come back to this when we get to the treatment section, but at his heart of hearts, his deepermost inner self, he doesn't really belong to either camp. He's kind of a gray figure, because he believes in independence. He believes in having his own identity, but he also believes in looking after those he cares about. He believes in goodness. He wants, people to be happy, for people to be able to get along, and ultimately for there not to be war, at least before he becomes Darth Vader. These are a lot of the ideals he was fighting for. And it was in part a disillusionment. Palpatine exploited this, but really Anakin, another part of Anakin's reasons for turning to the dark side was that he became very disillusioned with what the Republic had become, and came to believe that the things he was trying to protect and were fighting for had deserted him, or no longer mattered in the galaxy.
That's it. Which was partially true, but also very manipulative from Palpatine. I think that you can see it with him as a child, and now we're growing up into young adult or teenager. Let's go in sections. Really emotional, highly sensitive, deeply passionate about whatever he does. And then instead of being able to be taught to regulate his emotions, like you were talking about, they were trying to teach him to deny them. So now again, they're creating like this inner conflict, this identity fragmentation, to where he is fighting with self, because I'm not a slave anymore. I don't want to be treated like this anymore. I have rights to feel good about myself, to love, to care deeply about something, to be passionate about something, and so now we get this conflict, this internal and external conflict, and I saw a lot of mirrors of that with the real world, or our planet, let's say, where depending on your background, the trauma continues to perpetuate itself, where there's stoicism, there's strict obedience of having to adhere to somebody else's perceptions, and then there's this also emotional repressing or lack of processing, that creates his downfall, and it creates the many people in our world their downfall. So their feelings of self gets minimized, and then they start to become shamed, or feel shame, and they feel silenced, like they can't express emotions. They detach from their bodies as well, and we've seen this a lot of times, where they don't even understand how they're feeling, or they can't express it. They can't work through it, and you can see that, as a little boy with people. I'm going to say, at one point I kind of idolized, Yoda and everybody else. And I thought, well, now looking at it from another lens, I'm like, man, you guys are kind of messed up. Yeah.
It's so funny. I was just the other day listening to an interview with Dr. Sue Johnson, who you may or may not have heard of. She's a therapist in Canada who came up with a technique called, the acronym's great, it's EFIT.
Okay.
Which is just all about being very emotionally intensive focused with the treatment, especially for trauma patients. And a lot of what she does, a lot of what practitioners of EFT or people like I think it was Carl Rogers, some of the other therapists from that school of psychology.
Humanistic.
Humanistic. We're talking about
Rogerian,
is that
I love that.
Yes, exactly. The Rogerian and humanistic approaches is what the Jedi just never quite understood. The Jedi Council of the Old Republic never understood is that you have to go to that vulnerable place and allow yourself to feel the emotions so that you can know that that the world's not going to just blow up from feeling that, so that you can know the difference between pain and suffering, so that you can sit with those. You sit with them, and then you're be able to move on. Otherwise, you get locked into patterns of whatever those look like. You've seen this with your clients, just beating themselves up figuratively, literally, in some form or another, or avoidance, or all the different maladaptive manifestations it takes. And the only way out is through. But we're really, really good at finding ways to to not do that, to try everything but that. And Anakin was inadvertently a victim of that same process, which the Jedi unfortunately reinforced.
Yeah, well, that's the craziest part, is because it came from both sides. We had the Jedi's reinforcing. We also have Palpatine reinforcing, because he validates his pain, which is a great thing theoretically, right? But then he weaponizes it. That's the difference. And like you said earlier, I 1,000% agree with you. And I teach this or I work with people all the time with this idea that pain is inevitable, man. Pain is a part of life, but suffering is a choice. Unfortunately, we get so used to suffering that we'll choose it every time, because I can sit in this sucks, but oh well, I'll be okay. But the thought of pain, and it's not even that the pain that we anticipate will be that extravagant, that big. It's just the perception, or the dream of it. I can't think of the word right now, but it's the thought of what it might do that freaks us out, and we shut down, and we choose suffering again. So for him, but he wasn't born evil. It's just that he believed that fear, because he had experienced it so much, was power, and it was only the way to protect love. Yeah, and that is the key point that I kept coming up with in the stories, is that we see all this hate, we see all this horrendous these horrendous acts, and I haven't even gotten to the code or the the special number that we're going to say in a little while, but it's horrible, but all of it is connected to love, man. All of it, it's just misguided. His behaviors, his actions are all misguided because of the dual, not dual process, but the dual dynamics at play between the Jedi Order and Palpatine, and he's stuck in the middle.
You really hit the nail on the head with, I think, saying Palpatine validated his pain, because that is true. Even though he did exploit it and weaponize it and really make things worse in the long run for Anakin, at the time that was what Anakin, just on a subconscious level, was practically imploring Obi-Wan and all of the rest of the Jedi to grant him. Yeah, because Anakin never really got over either the grief from leaving his mother voluntarily, to say nothing of the grief when then she was killed by the Sand People 10 years later, and the fear. Because what that left him with wasn't just, because he was there, he tried to save her, but ultimately failed. And what that left him with wasn't just grief at her loss that was unresolved, but also fear that, as powerful as he had become with the Force, with his lightsaber, he still hadn't been able to save her. And the whole reason I think in his heart of hearts, because I mean, he does say this to his mom upon saying goodbye to her in episode 1, is that he's going to come back and free her someday when he's a Jedi and he's fully trained. And now he is a Jedi. He's fully trained, and he couldn't do anything for her.
And it still wasn't good enough.
It still wasn't good enough. So
in his
that
perception,
also,
anyway.
yeah, exactly. And so that left him with not just grief, but also fear that no matter how powerful he might become as a Jedi, being the key emphasis there, he might probably would never be able to protect those he loved indefinitely. And so when Palpatine comes along and says, not only I do validate your pain, yeah, that's awful, because Anakin eventually does confide in him about his mother and the Sand People, but then Palpatine says, I'll do you one better. What if I told you that there exists a power other than the Jedi that might be what you're looking for, that actually could maybe help protect these people you care about? I mean, that's, power became Anakin's savior over the fear.
It's the forbidden fruit, man. Of course. Yeah, he hopefully or ideally found an answer, and he was willing to give up everything and anything for it, because that would get him to be able to protect. That would be able to get him to be able to love and feel connection. And remember, just like we talk about with our clients, there's always several layers. I think Donkey and Shrek said it, best. We're like onions, right? There's a lot of layers, and it's true though, because horrible having to be born in slavery, then losing his mom, and then being really shunned by these people that are supposed to be the guardians of that's a different movie, but I'm just gonna say it anyways, the Guardians of the Galaxy, and and then going back, and then mom dies, and then there's the other layers of, now I'm an orphan, and a lot of people really minimize the idea of although he wasn't an adult, but I guess he was, but I'm going to use the word adult as an adult orphan. Orphans are not just children who lose their parents. As we get older, both of our parents are going to pass away. It's the natural part of life, and we will all become orphans at some point. And so now he has to deal with this emotional extreme suffering or pain, I should say, better word, of becoming an orphan, and now having nobody and nothing, no attachments, but here comes Palpatine with the magic fruit, the answer, which is all just manipulation. It's all darkness for the sake of an outcome. I give you this for you to give me this. It's very transactional, but he's so blinded by his own fears. He's having those nightmares and everything else, that he's going to lose even more.
He was desperate at that point.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. It's again a little hard to pick up on in the movie, because the movie's only 2 hours long. But if you have anybody listening to this episode, if you haven't read the official novelization of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, highly recommend it. Must read for any Star Wars fan. That book does a wonderful job of diving into great depth the lengths of disillusionment and desperation and really just sickness that Anakin had fallen to by the time of the end of the Clone Wars. And so much of it was cumulative. It wasn't a spur of the moment decision for him to make this. And even the nightmares, even his fear of losing Padme, or of Obi-Wan, before he betrayed the Jedi, even those weren't the whole story. Because a lot of what he did during the Clone Wars, even before Palpatine started to take a more active role, was already kind of stacking up to make him a lot less stable in individual. There's an episode actually of the Clone Wars where he and Obi-Wan and Anakin's apprentice Ahsoka Tano are sent to a planet with slaves. That's a slavery colony that they end up having to free, but Anakin finds himself just constantly on the verge of snapping and going full Terminator on the slaveholders, completely against the Jedi code. And his apprentice Ahsoka can't understand why her master's so wound up and ready to kill. And eventually Obi-Wan has to take her aside and explain to her Anakin used to be a slave as a child. And that's why he's going through this. But even Obi-Wan has to say to Anakin, cool it, my young Padawan. This is not. We're here to. We're attempting to make love, not war.
Right. Again, turn off your emotions. But there could have been a better way. But that doesn't matter. And then there was a statement that I don't remember if it was Darth Vader, and I found it online. But it was a quote from him. It's, if I can't stop the pain, I will control the world around me to avoid it. And I thought that was so powerful, man. I think it goes with everything that we're talking about, that he found the what we use in session as the magic pill question, right? If you took this magic pill and everything was perfect tomorrow, what would it look like? He thought he found the literal magic pill, and he was going to use it, and he was going to be able to save it. And I wonder if he even thought that he would be able to use it to be able to get out of Palpatine's grasps, that he was going to be so powerful that he would never be under anybody's thumb ever again, which is not the case. Yeah, your head's flying, man. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love that you said that. Because ultimately, I think that was Anakin's own private desire, even when he agreed to become Palpatine's apprentice. I think, again, probably subconsciously, or maybe not subconsciously, who knows? But some level, he was planning his own agenda to just be what's the phrase? Beholden to none, and never again answer to any higher power, because the buck would stop with him, and
that would be it.
Yeah, and that would be it. And then he would.
Power.
Yeah, that's a great quote. If I can't stop the pain, I will control the world around
the world around me to avoid it.
The world around me to avoid it. And that's exactly what Anakin set out to become by choosing to turn to the dark side.
And then I don't want to fast forward, and we keep. Or I keep doing it because I keep thinking of different times in space. And like you said, we're going to be going back and forth, and you can bring me back. But, after he unfortunately becomes he theoretically gets killed, but he doesn't. He's burnt. He's missing limbs. He's just a mess on the floor. And then they find him. Palpatine finds him, and they create his armor. We almost can see that as a symbolic shift. He was already shifting, he was already going, but that for me, now this can protect him from the pain, quote unquote. I don't know how much of it, I don't know how much pain he was still in, but let's just pretend and use it more of symbolism. And then, but it also cuts him off from connection. Now he is completely isolated, but for a good reason in his mind, right? This is his opportunity to now only be who he is, Darth Vader. And he even says, I think one of his quotes was, I wrote down a bunch of quotes that just really stuck out to me. He talks about himself in the third person. So he's disassociation from Anakin. And he says that name no longer has any meaning to me. Which is a big sign that he's chosen this persona, because this persona can never be hurt again. This persona will never be let down. This persona will never be betrayed. This persona will never feel the emotional pain. And I think this again, and man, I for all of you that are going to get mad at me, I've really fallen in love with Mr. Vader here. He's showing us again how deeply he cares how much he loves, man, because he wants to disassociate so badly so he can never have to feel that again. And that's something that slips by a lot of people because we sit in this point of judgment. But us, we do this work. We don't judge. I've seen perpetrators. I've seen victims. I've seen left, right, up, and down, and everybody in between. And it's not about judgment. It's about understanding. And I feel like I really have a deeper connection and understanding for Anakin slash Vader than I ever have.
I'm going to jump forward and
okay, let's go.
I'm going to jump backward and then forward again immediately.
Okay.
So to that point, and on Mustafar, right before his fateful duel with Obi-Wan, where he gets maimed and is eventually taken back by Palpatine to become Darth Vader, Anakin makes a proposition to Padme when she confronts him and offers to have her join him. And he says, if you stay with me and accept who I am now, I'll overthrow Palpatine. I'm more powerful than him. We'll
take over the world.
We'll take over the world. We'll do it together. That's exactly what you were talking about before, which is Anakin trying to push his own private agenda of answering to no one, so that there can be no more pain because the world itself is under his control. And then, obviously, doesn't work out that way.
No.
But what's so interesting is that then flash forward 19 or 20 years to Empire Strikes Back, when he's facing Luke on Cloud City. Vader makes the exact same proposition to Luke after he disarms Luke and cuts his hand off. He says,
yes,
join me, and together we will overthrow the Emperor and rule the galaxy as father and son. 2 decades later, and he's still struggling.
Anakin's still there.
Anakin's still there. He's still trying. He's still feeling trapped, yet still fighting to push through for that control.
Yes. You made the same association, man. It's there, dude. He's still there. Anakin has always been there. He's not a sociopath. He's not. It's hard to defend him sometimes, man. But he is. There is a good heart in there. But he figured out in his own dark way that dominance is his trauma response. He needs to attempt to control everything, people, outcomes, whatever it might be, so that he can feel safe. So in reality, what we're seeing is an insecure little boy that's trying to not feel pain anymore. And that's what I see when I see him. And I feel so much empathy for him. Of course, if he wasn't in session with me and he was still out cruising the stars, he'd probably cut me in half. But in session, he was a little tough, a little rough around the edges. But there was a kind heart in there. There was a little hurt boy, an orphaned man, a husband lost, a father disconnected and disassociated from his children, a person that found a brother, that found a mentor that he feels hurt him, a person that found a father that died, that was taken away. Just layers upon layers, and his mom, and again, it's like a donkey, man. So many layers to this onion. But at the heart of it, Anakin was still there.
When Luke is the first one in so long to propose the idea that Anakin is still there, it really is to Luke's credit that it's he and not Yoda, not even Obi-Wan, who still believes that there's some of Anakin left in Vader. And in spite of all that Vader has become, because I think you really said it earlier when you were pointing out how he's not a sociopath. He never stopped feeling, and though he learned to conceal it very well, parts of his humanity would still rise to the surface given the right opportunity. But that in itself it just makes him all the more tragic when you take that into account, that if he never really truly stopped feeling, it must have just been an endless nightmare of torture to be committing the atrocities that he did as Vader, even as he was still feeling the catharsis of dominance and the thrill of his control. There was, I think, then also a part of him that never stopped hurting or really suffering, because that was what he had chosen at that point.
I gotta agree, and also maybe even disagree, in the sense that I've experienced this with my gang member clients and cartel people and prisoners and different people I've worked with throughout the years, is that there is some regrets sometimes, but they are very good at changing the narrative to not feel that guilt, because there was a reason for it. That person's friends, cousin hurt my family or hurt somebody that I care about, and so this is why, and it's justification. So they disassociate from the pain or the suffering, and they make a rational argument for it. And I think that's probably what he did inside. I think there was parts of him that decided that what I'm doing is justified because it's for the greater good. And for Luke, and I love doing this, and I think I've probably done it in everything we've talked about so far. You can see little Anakin. You see how Anakin would have been with the right guidance, with love, man, with connection. You see his roles playing out through somebody else, through his own son and his daughter. His daughter's feisty. I would say she's stronger than Luke, and then and definitely smarter. But there's all this counterbalance happening, and you could see why. At least specifically for Luke, why he can see the kindness in his father still, because he sees a reflection of himself, just like Darth Vader or Anakin sees a reflection of himself through his son. So you see the family dynamics, man, and it's so beautiful that love, again, and this is going to sound corny as hell, conquers all, man. It seeps through if we let it, and everything is about perspective. We can choose to perceive a situation in a certain way, and this is something we teach our clients as well. And that'll come true. That'll manifest, right? And it's let me give you something simple, or give the listener something simple. You walk into a party, and let's say you're a beautiful woman in a nice dress, and you walk in, and people look at you. You can decide they're all giving me dirty looks. They all hate me. They're all talking crap about me. Or you can say, man, it must look good tonight. That's so nice that I look nice, or I feel good about myself. I'm glad that I showed up to this. Whatever the outcome is, it doesn't matter. It's your perception of the moment that's going to make the difference. And now it's kind of a weird sidestep, but let's bring it back to them. The perception of self for Luke was, I need to do the right things, and I don't agree with suppressing my emotions and everything else like they try to teach my dad. Really, he didn't know that yet. And for Anakin, it was the same, man. The only difference was the upbringing, and the only difference that upbringing made was on their perception, how they were going to perceive the moments.
Luke was faced with a very similar choice to some of the ones Anakin had been confronted with, because Obi-Wan and Yoda wanted him to kill Vader for the greater good, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And Luke said, "No, I can't kill my own father. I'm not doing that." And that's such an Anakin thing. That's such an Anakin response.
Exactly. Yeah.
To Luke, Anakin, his father, meant more. It wasn't about the ideals. It wasn't about, doing the quote unquote right thing. It was about love. It was about that interconnection and that, as you said, that mirror because there's that wonderful scene again, symbolism in Empire Strikes Back, where Luke confronts a shadow of Vader on Dagobah, and then he defeats it, but then the helmet bursts apart, and it's revealed that it's Luke's own face inside. And there's a million different ways you can interpret that scene, but one of them, for the sake of this episode, one of the options is that Luke is Anakin, as he could have been, should have been, still is.
That's exactly where my head went. My head went to this idea that, this is family systems, that everything, whether it was more genetic than well, I would even argue that it was even more than that, because uncles and different people in his life that had associations with Anakin created this foundation for who Luke became, which was associated with his father. It's all interconnected, man. And this is the whole thing. When you're a little kid and your parents tell you, I forgot what the saying, something like, the people you hang around with is who you are, or whatever, whatever the saying is. But you see that play out, because these subtleties do seep in. You pick and choose. You're going to choose, like, I'm not going to do this because it's not right. It doesn't feel right for me. Or I do adopt this ideal that, yeah, I'm not going to shut off my emotion. I'm not going to kill this man that's my dad, because it's the right, quote unquote, thing to do. But for me, the right thing to do is to give him a chance to rectify the situation, or suffer the consequences. And the consequences for him may be imprisonment, or however. I don't even know where his head was, but he was very sure that he was going to be able to make a difference. So yeah, man, it's so many layers. It's just beautiful to see.
To just hammer home, I think, the final point about the parallels between the two of them. You were saying how Luke is a mirror of Anakin, as he might have been. And I was talking earlier, too, about how Anakin never really quite fit into either school of thought, with the Jedi or the Sith. Well, lo and behold, in the at least in the original Legends canon, post Return of the Jedi, Luke finishes that. Luke brings that full circle when he founds a new Jedi Order that's built on philosophies of the in-between. That's neither Jedi nor Sith, but it allows for acknowledgement of emotions. It allows for Jedi to be a little more autonomous, a little more independent. It doesn't forbid marriage or emotional attachments or being very close with your friends. Yet it still preaches a lot of the same messages of goodness, of peace, of stability and security that the original Jedi Order was known for back in the day. And obviously it doesn't condone the cruelty and manipulation of the Sith, but it walks that middle ground that Anakin, in his own way, was always trying to walk, especially during the Clone Wars, that neither the Jedi or even Palpatine, for that matter, ever fully understood.
I totally agree. Yeah, and I love that our client led us down that path, and ideally, in time, hopefully, started to see that, man, that there was a gray area, and he because of his trauma, he's always been so black or white. He's which is interesting given who he is, but yeah, it's either the dark side or the light side. There was no in between, but there always is. And again, family dynamics, it's interesting how they play a role, whether it's through interactions or genetically, because you can also see it, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, but through his nephew, the same thing. His nephew is the same way. He tries to lean towards his uncle a little bit more, but he doesn't have it in him to be his uncle, man. He just doesn't. He has a bigger heart than he is letting himself feel, because he's scared of it. He would rather sit in suffering than feel any pain. Yeah, sorry to take you over there, but yeah, I figured they're all intertwined anyway.
Oh, they are.
And I
Well, I
wanted
mean,
to,
we could, we'll get to Kylo Ren, no question, in due course. Plenty of Mays to come, but
for sure.
I will say for now, I think that the dynamic between Kylo and Luke is very much akin to the dynamic between Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Yes. It's the similarities in the sense that he wants to show him, and he knows that there's love inside of him. He knows there's a kindness inside of him, and that he knows he's going to figure it out in his own time. I love this, and I'm really getting sidetracked, man, but I just really love that red sand scene where he's like, give them everything we got, because they know, it's Luke. We're screwed, and then he just kind of walks out and brushes his shoulder off.
It's the best.
I love that. I love that so much. And yeah, and so
it's a great moment.
It really showed this same thing of where Anakin would have been depending on his upbringing. But that's neither here nor there, because he didn't have that. So with what we have and all the information, we can obviously go on for hours and hours and hours. What are you thinking, man? I'm just going to throw it out there. Complex PTSD for me.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Million credit question. I think it's complex PTSD.
Without a doubt.
Let me just say this to all our listeners. We're going to be giving out this diagnosis a lot.
I feel like these people are just built that way.
Look, it's nothing. Do we have a trauma bias? Maybe, but this is pretty common.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, look at do a Google search, guys and gals, man. Do a Google search, because he fits the criteria like if it was made for him. It's almost like whoever created the DSM or any of the diagnosing books, they're like, oh, there it is. He's the one. This is our poster boy. In our defense, we have used other things prior, but man, there's so much trauma in these characters, but specifically for Anakin.
Exactly. How can you not have this be the diagnosis when that's all that his life has been defined by, from literally birth? It's complex PTSD. Multiple.
Oh, for sure. Multiple layers of developmental trauma. From birth into, developmental ages. War trauma. Unresolved grief. And we can just go on and on and on. I mean, he probably is the textbook of just about every part of every bit of trauma that you can have. Missing, some, but nothing that he's disclosed yet, right?
Right, but it goes beyond even the psychological aspect of trauma. In Anakin's case, it's trauma on all planes. It's emotional trauma, it's psychological trauma, it's physical trauma. He's got all of this
yeah.
all of these scars, all of these missing limbs, and cybernetic substitutes that keep him alive. He is a walking cage of bodily trauma. After he becomes Vader, I don't know. I'm blanking on the details, but there are aspects of his suit that I think Palpatine kind of also dropped the ball on a little bit, because Star Wars nerds listening to us, feel free to send me the tech specs and lowdown on how his suit works. But I believe that there are some components of it that really weren't the best options for the injuries that he had. The fact that he has to use that he has a breath filter he breathes into, as opposed to just ways to have the oxygen be fed more directly into his damaged lungs. The fact that even after he spends days submerged in Bacta tanks for his skin and burnt away hair, his skin still is pallid, is cut in places when Luke finally reveals. I mean, the suit's not comfortable. It's not a eco-friendly. It's not a luxurious, made for accommodation model.
Do you think that was by design?
I do. I think that was
I thought the same
intentional by
thing.
Palpatine. That was all part of Palpatine's intent to always be able to have some level of control over Anakin, and increasing the amount of daily pain that Anakin was forced to tolerate would have made it harder for him to build up any kind of resilience to Palpatine's hold on him.
And just like any abusive relationship, it would make him be he would need Palpatine.
Yeah, it kept him dependent to a certain degree on Palpatine and the dark side and really the Empire, despite how powerful a figure in its ranks he became. Another actually fun trivia fact: originally, after he became Darth Vader, it wasn't right away that he was recognized as an asset to the Empire by the Empire's navy and military. Palpatine knew what he was capable of course, right. and was never going to question that. But Vader was passed over by a lot of the Imperial brass in the early days of the Empire as just being this sort of junkyard sideshow pet project of the emperors, and not really having any value to what they were setting out to do, which is really crazy when you think about it.
It's super crazy.
Yeah, it was actually Grand Moff Tarkin, who we see in Episode 4 and Rogue One, who was the first high-ranking Imperial officer to really start to refer to Vader and treat him as a peer, as a capable military strategist and warrior in general, which of course Vader, having been a Jedi general as Anakin in the Clone Wars, certainly was. Well, at the risk of spending all day in the entire 9 movie saga, what do you think about treatment for meeting with Vader or Anakin after everything that's happened to him?
I struggled with this part, not because I didn't know what to do. I just didn't know where to start, man. And I felt like, some trauma-focused therapy at the beginning. I'm not EMDR certified, but I hear that works very well. I don't know much about it. I don't know enough about it to talk on it. But I think systematic work. I think processing some of his core memories, the death of his mom, death of Padme, Mustafar, his fall. Looking at how all of this has gone through and letting him speak, and then now for him to be able to get validated from another perspective, somebody that's not judgmental or going to use him in any way, which is going to be on his toes. He's going to be prepared for me to use him or try to take advantage of him or judge him or whatever it might be. And in time, he's going to realize that I'm not, that I'm actually so deeply moved by his story and his life that I'm not going to judge his actions, although horrible. But that's part of his process. That's what his life has done. Maybe some body work, because he's really, really, really disconnected from his own body at this point. He put that cage on. I call it a cage, but it's his suit. And he disconnected from everyone. Like I said earlier, he got an opportunity to finally hide, avoid the pain that he's always been trying to avoid. I'd work through some of his guilt, his shame. I would try to work on his self-compassion, not his arrogance. He's good at that, but his self-compassion. I'd work on identity reintegration. Trying to let him know that Anakin and Vader are the same person, and that they are mutually as strong and mutually as vulnerable, and that's okay. And the vulnerability is a superpower, man. So I would try to work on the parts that his wounded self of self, some IFS, some internal family systems. Explore, the Vader parts and how that protected him, and And like I have been trying to connect the dots on how his family systems have all interacted, and you can see it through his son, through his daughter, through him, through his nephew, through his sister, through everybody and everybody, or not his sister, but everybody and anybody, of how they were all interconnected. Emotional re-education at some point. I don't know
some
when we'll
point
get
being
there.
The operative word.
Yeah, at some point. And some attachment repair. And I probably use Luke as a bridge to try to gap some of that stuff. Give him some safety and vulnerability, because I think that's going to be it. And for him, vulnerability, and just like some of the other people we've worked with, vulnerability is a tricky thing, but it would be not teaching him to be, I don't even know how to word this, but let's go extreme, not to be gushy and ushy. But what I want him to be is comfortable saying that, yeah, that I messed up, or that sucks, or that hurts, or whatever it is. That vulnerability doesn't have to be over weakness. It just means that you're comfortable in your own skin. And then frame his own healing is not like weakness, but as an act of courage. And then maybe some spiritual work. His "I am beyond redemption" is another one of his quotes, or was there still, or not one of his quotes, one of my thoughts. Maybe it was one of his quotes. I have it.
He does say to Luke at one point, it is too late for me, son," which is similar.
Was there still good in me all along? Those are questions maybe I would kind of float through him. Not in those words, obviously. I just wrote them down that way to help me remember them. And then guiding through him, like trying to find meaning in all of it. Very Holocaust survivor. I can't. The man's search for meaning. The therapist. I forgot his name. Viktor Frankl. Trying to find meaning in all of it, because I think there's meaning, and as we can change the meaning of certain things, we can palate it a little bit better, and I'm hoping it's more. We can make it a little bit more palatable for him, so that this shift isn't so huge. It's just a reconnection of self. Versus, what his thought process might be of a whole new identity. So that would be my framework, give or take. We're in therapy, and whoever's listening, we have an idea of where we want to go. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But sometimes you guys will throw a curveball at us, and we'll start at the end and then work our way forward and backwards and everywhere in between, and that's okay. There is no one size fits all. Well, maybe there is for like a CBT therapist, but there, in my opinion, there is not. There's layers, and there's opportunity. We need to take those opportunities.
Personally and professionally, I don't think CBT would really be Vader's cup of tea either for a method of approach.
He would be so pissed off and disconnected from it, because now you're just another person telling him what to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or what about you? What are you thinking?
Yeah. Similar to you, I think I would actually start with the somatic work and the body and the pain. Because the thing is that, from where I was coming from, and we were talking about this earlier, is that he's been living a life of constant physical pain in the suit, the cage, the trauma, both metaphorical and literal, that it represents and inflicts upon him daily. I mean, he's been trapped in that on that waking nightmare for over 20 years at this point. So I would start there. I would say I like what you were talking about with taking a new approach to pain. I would say let's start with the physical pain. Do some somatic work, do some work with and this honestly might not be something I would do with him. This might be like a referral out for the initial phase, and then once he's made some progress, because it's just not my own area of specialty. but do some pain management. Do he might be receptive to EMDR. I don't think that it would be enough on its own, but just to begin with, for processing some of the emotions that are linked to the physical pain, and sort of learning to I think build some new neural pathways for him between where his body ends and the suit starts, that kind of thing. He might appreciate the silent aspect of EMDR in the very beginning, because it's very similar to I think what the Jedi would often teach with meditation, but it wouldn't be that, and it would be acknowledging of his pain, so it wouldn't be going backwards at the same time, which is what we want for him.
But it would be familiar.
But it would be familiar, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, it would be familiar.
That makes sense.
Starting with that approach, and then once he's learned to start to feel more comfortable in his body physically again, then we go into the emotional work. We start to talk. I would start, psychoeducation, and not challenging, but again, building off of what's familiar to him, in terms of finding ways to reframe and look at his own identity differently. Because, like you said, he never stopped being Anakin, but finding a way to, I think, for him to help redefine what does it mean to be Anakin? Because Anakin, that is kind of a loaded question, and one that he never really found the true answer to in his life, because the answer, what he thought was the answer, kept having to change out of necessity and circumstance. So one thing I might do with him is ask him about his relationship with technology, because even though he went through all of the awful body trauma with his suit after Mustafar, prior to that, Anakin was an individual who was always very at ease with technology. The irony is, he was a tinkerer, like his mother. He built his own pod racer at age 9. He built C-3PO, right. When he was starting, I think when he was 6. He just didn't have the parts to do it faster. But even when he lost his arm, not with Obi-Wan, but before that, when he first lost his arm against Count Dooku and got his first mechanical arm, there were whisperings, from the Jedi that he lost a piece of his humanity in that. But actually, that wasn't what happened. Anakin, was being as comfortable with technology, quickly came to regard his arm as being every bit as his own, an extension of himself, the same way his lightsaber or his starship was an extension of himself, and he would tinker with it just the same. And that was kind of, I think that synergy that he had with technology was disrupted when Palpatine forced the unnecessary burdens of his suit and the trauma that came with that on him when he became with Darth Vader. But I think if through therapy, there might be a way to reawaken that more positive, balanced connection. Now that, we're still seeing him when he still has mechanical components that are a part of him, finding a way to build a new relationship with that.
Or like a reintegration of self, really.
Yeah.
That's where my thought process was too. I love the fact that you brought that up, because I think you're right. I think there is something to that, the association. I don't know if that's even the right word, but all his parts, he accepts them as him. He doesn't dismiss them as something else. He does dismiss himself as something else. So if you were to work on him, like you're saying, and to reintegration, it would be easier for him, because he wouldn't see it as a mechanical hand. He would see it as, oh wait, this is already cognitively, not subconscious, but consciousness. He would know that this is me. The only missing link is that he would once again realize that he's always been Anakin. Anakin didn't go anywhere. That's awesome. I love that. What else? Where else would you take him, or what else would you do, or would you continue that? Because that's a lot of work right there, man.
Yeah, that's right there is a good I think 30 or 40 sessions minimal.
It's a big job, right?
It's a big job. Yeah. I mean, that would probably be the vast majority of treatment. But if we kept going, if he was, I'm sure He's a good patient. He shows up on time. I mean,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
Republic has great health benefits, so there's
They
no.
have incredible. They pay 100%, man. Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah.
I love them. Only
My full
insurance that
fee.
I'm happy to directly contract with. No need to negotiate rates
no,
with.
no need to go. Yeah.
So yeah, let's say we're working together for a while. We start to hit that next phase of treatment in our therapeutic relationship. Yeah, I'd probably bring in Luke and Leia and do some conjoint family sessions. I think Luke would actually be in a position to further reinforce that same kind of new approach to technology that we'd been working on, because Luke has a mechanical hand of his own, and he's also very tech savvy. So
there it is again. There's the family. There's the family dynamics again, man.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you can work with that and have Luke, act as an additional resource and source of connection and mirror, through the family systems. And yeah, I'd get to the what you were talking about too, the emotional education. Do some psychoeducation about trauma, and eventually start to, if he was comfortable, go to unpacking the grief, and just do that very gradually, layer by layer, piece by piece. Talk about the grief from his his time as Vader, if that's what he wanted to talk about, or talk about the grief from the Clone Wars, from the harshness of fighting in a war, the military trauma, or even if he wanted to, just talk about his mother, if he felt like, he'd already said and thought all there was to think about his time as a Jedi and Sith, and he really just wanted to dive right that. I'd say, yeah, tell me about your mother. What was she like? What do you remember about her? Maybe we'd talk about her love of technology as well, because Shmi actually would make part of her income. In her spare time, she would work cleaning and repairing devices that got sand in them from the Tatooine windstorms. So, Anakin definitely inherited some of that from her. So rebuilding that sense of happiness, of remembering her in a positive light, as opposed to just the fear and the grief that her death left him with, and going forward with that. And if we're able to, I think hopefully helping him find a way to see the joy and the love that he has with his new family, with his children, with the people that they end up getting married to. It didn't happen in the Disney canon, but in the original Legends, Luke also gets married to a woman named Mara Jade, who also ironically used to be a servant of Palpatine's.
Interesting.
Very,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, their love story is a wonderful arc in the original sequel novels, and she's not a Sith, but she is Force sensitive, and originally was is trying to kill Luke on like the last orders of a Force message Palpatine sent her right before he died. So the fact that eventually they get married, again, just Luke being this wonderful anchor, and taking his inspirational cues from Anakin too, about how you can always see someone for more than they appear to be. Exactly.
And I think that's for me, and I'm assuming for you, and I'm going to talk for you, but correct me if I'm wrong, man. But for me, I think for him, it's the we can go through all of these theoretical concepts or whatever it is, but we need to be calm. We need to be grounded. We can't be afraid. He's going to test us. He tests everybody. Everybody he's ever come across, worked with, indirectly or directly, he tests them. So he doesn't need a savior. He doesn't want one. He needs a mirror. We need to show up as somebody that understands him, and then maybe does things a different way. We own our own space, and that mirror image, that ability to be present in time, will start to leak into his own consciousness. Right? We need to be really present with him. I think that's going to be the key to it. Not persuasive, because it's going to piss him off, and he's going to feel like he's been manipulated. We need to do nothing with persuasion. It needs to be just completely and utterly present. And for me, it's and I wrote this down specifically. Speak to the man under the armor, not the myth. I want to talk to him. Whatever the hell he wants to call himself, Bill. I don't care. I'm going to talk to that guy. And ideally, he'll understand that Luke, again, when we're saying this over and over, Luke and Vader are the same person. What's your long-term vision? I got a couple ideas of where I want to go. You can start if you want, or
let me ask you one thing just on this same topic, and then I'll come back to that, because that's a great question. But I'm curious, as a therapist, because you're right, he's we're seeing him after the fact that the Empire's gone and he's renounced the dark side, but he
lost something else again.
Yeah, he's still a very powerful and potentially dangerous individual who has control over the Force and and lightsaber combat and all of that. So as a therapist, what are some steps that you might take to stay centered, to always keep your professional composure, and just feel like you know what your job is and what you're there to do when you go into session with him?
Me personally, I just connect with their story, and I don't judge. Man. When I first started in grad school, I was part of CAPIT, Child Abuse Prevention, Intervention, and Treatment. I wasn't even out of school yet, and I was working with child molesters, victims of child molestation, and so that taught me a lot. It taught me that what I'm sitting across is not a monster, but rather a child. I would say 99% of the time they were molested themselves, and the cycle continues. So for me, it was completely being present, non-judgmental. And never again, and that's why I wrote persuasive, never trying to persuade them to see things my way. I wanted them to see things their way, whatever that might be. He might justify, well, I had to kill those kids because that was the only way I can get that power. Okay, well, let's run through it. What was it like? I mean, that was a lot of little kids. That was a lot of blood, man. That was a lot of pain. What was it? How was it? I don't know if I word it that way, but let me word it that way to you. How was it similar to you growing up as a little kid and watching people getting slaughtered? Was it justified? And he's gonna make his own connection, and I'm going to hand it to him. It's like a plate of food, and he's gonna do whatever he wants. It's gonna rot, or he's gonna eat it. It's up to him. But I think for me, it's being completely non-judgmental, which makes me feel in a space of comfort, because now I'm not attached or married to any outcome. I don't need to. I'm not trying to fix him. There's no such thing. I'm just showing up. I'm showing up with this kid that's hurting, man. Showing up with this kid that's suffering, that has been suffering, that's an orphan, that's lost everything, and now he's even lost the Empire. He lost, he's lost everything, and now he needs somebody to show him that he can continue living, that there's something next, and if we give new meaning to everything, then we can get him. And this is my long-term vision. We can get him to own his story, whatever that might be. Something maybe restoring like his dignity as Anakin Skywalker, right? The man, the person, the man he's always was meant to be. I think that would be my long-term goal, but it's going to be on his time, and with his perspective, his meaning, whatever he wants. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, literally what you were going to say. That's exactly what I think the long term for me as well would be. Because it's not about having expectations. It's certainly not about persuasion or judgment. It really is just going to be about about making sense of this new chapter that, for better or worse, has now opened to him, and that there is still connection to be made if he wants it. That his children are there. They haven't given up on him. They never did. They love him, and perhaps there's a place for him in their lives going forward. But all of that has to come, has to be realized by him on his own terms, through his own logic, through his own individual process, because that's what it's going to take for Anakin Vader, for that identity
there you go,
to reach its final truth with itself.
Darth Skywalker? No,
Darth
I think
Skywalker.
Anakin Vader sounds Anakin Vader sounds better. But
Anakin Vader. Mr. Anakin
I
Vader.
agree. Mr. Anakin Vader. I agree with you, man. I think that's it. I think the only thing that I would really hone in on is not even about. I would use the kids as information, as an opportunity for love, empathy, connection, trust in his own way. But really, it's about him reconnecting with self. I think that's where it needs to start and end. Because if we can get that, everything else will fall into place when it needs to.
Daniel, it's been wonderful out here in the galaxy, Coruscant, and all the other locals. And we're not going anywhere. We've got a lot more for the rest of the month of May out here among the stars. So stay tuned. We'll see you all next time.